Welcome to the Apron Academy. This video is specially designed for the dietitian in training, also known as the RD-to-be. In this video, we're talking about phosphorus. So, phosphorus is second only to calcium in abundance. So calcium is our most abundant divalent cation in the body, and phosphorus is a runner-up. So even though phosphorus is very much so needed in our body, and I'll tell you why in just a second, but we are kind of concerned about the amount that we actually have. So it's found in the body as PO4, so as phosphate, and that can bind to calcium and magnesium. So we need it to help form ATP, we need it for DNA and RNA, also phospholipids. And it's important to note that all membranes of all cells need phosphates. So it's absorbed through passive diffusion, and like I mentioned earlier, because we intake so much, it doesn't need to get pushed through a transporter. It just passes right on through with passive diffusion. It is regulated by vitamin D, but we don't exactly know much about that mechanism. So, how does it get into the body? So, again, my lovely little picture of a kidney, and we have our nephrons, and then here is a little bit closer up, and even here is kind of just our orange part. But this is our glucomerus. We have the proximal convoluted tubule, have our descending loop of Henle, ascending loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, and collecting duct. So our kidneys regulate plasma phosphate levels in our proximal tubule, and then phosphate is reabsorbed by an active sodium phosphate transporter. So that's why I kind of have this little rectangle here. That's signaling that this is a sodium phosphate cotransporter able to release and reabsorb the phosphate. So, I'm going to mention this a little bit later, but I want to touch on this because it's so important. It's fine if I repeat it. That FGF23 acts on the kidneys to suppress the expression of the transporter and increase urinary phosphate excretion. So FGF23 kind of prevents those transporters from reabsorbing phosphate, so it's encouraging it to keep on moving along and excreting out of the body. Parathyroid hormone, PTH, also promotes phosphate excretion by that inhibiting the reabsorption by both sodium-dependent and independent transport pathways. So in the kidneys, FGF23 and parathyroid hormone work together to get rid of phosphate. Because if we have high levels of phosphate or phosphorus, then it's no bueno. Got to get that out of there. So it is important to note that 1,25-OHD, or that activated form of vitamin D, helps increase phosphate reabsorption. So it takes that away and works against parathyroid hormone and FGF23. So I will mention the function in bones a little later. It is very different, but in the kidneys, FGF23 and parathyroid hormone work together to get rid of phosphorus. And now FGF23 gets rid of the phosphate, but if we don't have FGF23, we could have hyperphosphatemia, so whole lot of levels of the phosphate, which can mimic aging. Oh, I mentioned this here. So FGF 23 and the parathyroid hormone work together. Now, in the bone, in bone, calcitonin functions like FGF23, and it works in opposition to the parathyroid hormone in bone resorption. So in bone, the parathyroid hormone is encouraging our bones to break down so that we can get enough calcium into our body. But calcitonin and FGF23 are saying, no, don't break down the bone, protecting that bone. So calcitonin, FGF23, reducing bone resorption. Parathyroid hormone allows bone resorption in order to increase blood calcium. Now, in our bone, it's made up of collagen fiber and also non-collagenous proteins, or that calcium phosphate, the hydroxyapatite. Our bone mass increases up until the age of 30, and then throughout our life, our bones are constantly being remodeled. We have bone turnover every several weeks by osteoblasts and osteoclasts. And now, just in order to clarify and moving forward, our osteoblasts are the ones that build bone. Osteoclast break down bone. So this isn't all that important. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but this just shows like how they start out, and then we get our osteoblasts and then our osteoclasts, which kind of look like a little Pac-Man ghost. And they are the scary ones that break down the bone. Osteoblasts have receptors for parathyroid hormone, estrogen, 125-OHD, and they regulate the flux of calcium and phosphate in our bone. So with resorption, osteoclasts determine the rate of breakdown. So they are a phagocytic cell type, so they're going to phagocytize or eat up the bone. Now, kind of to explain what it does. So, parathyroid hormone acts on osteoblasts, our bone-building cells, and it binds to these osteoblasts and stimulates the expression of rankle. So this little antenna-looking thing is expressing rankle, and I'll just write down. Now, our osteoblasts make this rankle expressed on the membrane. Rankle binds to rank. So this here is our rank, and rank is on top of our osteoclasts, or the cells that break down the bone. Now, once rank acts on the osteoclasts, and once there's a binding here, these osteoclasts go through some differentiation, and here they're premature, but as they go through this differentiation, they actually become mature, and they become an activated osteoclast. So now it's finally able to do something. It's finally able to break down the bone, allow for bone resorption. So how does it do that? How does it help with bone resorption? So imagine, this is going to continue to go out. We have, a nice little bone here. And this is definitely not to scale, but we have our bone here, and we also have on top of the bone this osteoclast has binded. There has a seal has been made, so it's sealed off from the rest of the bone, and then from these little ruffled borders, lysosomal enzymes are secreted into this sealed portion of the bone. It also secretes collagenase and protons to help dissolve the hydroxyapatite, that calcium phosphate, and then therefore the bone is resorbed and our blood calcium levels are increased in our body. So with regulation, our osteoclasts have receptors for calcitonin, and our activity is decreased by it. So calcitonin inhibits bone resorption and functions again like that FGF23 against the parathyroid hormone in bone. So parathyroid hormone, there are no parathyroid hormone receptors on osteoclasts. So FGF23 also helps bone resorption. That just goes back to what I was saying here. Parathyroid hormone helps this bone resorption, but calcitonin and FGF23 are trying to prevent this from happening. All right, so I do want to just mention, before I mention what happens if I don't have enough, just clarify again how phosphorus functions. It helps with the metabolic trapping of substrates, helps with signaling molecules, so the kinase phosphatases. It's a cofactor for metabolic enzymes. It's an acid-base buffer for different things, so it changes the acidity. And again, very important to form ATP, for RNA and DNA, and for phospholipids in our membranes. So what happens if I don't have enough? Like we mentioned earlier, deficiency is rare because we're actually more concerned about excess phosphorus, but there can be deficiency in premature infants. We can see hypophosphatemia, and then therefore inadequate bone mineralization and rickets in those babies. But with excess phosphorus, we see things like hypocalcemia. So if you've watched the calcium video, you know that we need calcium, so hypocalcemia is not very good. It can cause tetany, so our muscles are spazzing out. You have soft tissue calcification, intestinal distress, mild diarrhea. The concern here is use in additives and soft drinks. So very important to monitor that going forward. As you can see in this video, phosphorus is so necessary. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe, and share this video with others. Thanks.